What's going on, guys? I'm finally back. Now, I do want to apologize. I've been gone for some time now, but I just had some stuff going on. Now, some of you might be thinking, where's Mario? I don't see Mario with you. Well, today, we're not going to be talking about Mario. Mario's kind of busy. He's doing his stuff on the Kaizo grind and getting the stars, saving the princess. You know the drill. The usual. So I know some of you right now are thinking, well, if Mario's not here, and you're not talking about Mario, what the heck are you going to be talking about? Well, you see, I was thinking, since I happen to be a very big Magic the Gathering nerd, and I also happen to be a little bit magical myself, why don't I start something up since it's Monday? Perhaps Magic Mondays? Now, some of you are probably thinking, I could just bet with Mario Mondays, but Mario's my jam, and I do it every day of the week anyways, so we'll make Monday a little special for Magic. So things to expect would be anything varying from deck text to spoilers of new cards, my take on certain cards and top 10s and stuff like that. This will happen on Mondays, and of course, don't worry, I'm still going to keep the Mario thing going. That's my jam, like I said. And I know I've been ghosting recently, but I'm back and I'm here and I'm going to make some moves. And as for today, I thought we'd kick things off with a nice little deck tech. Now, again, for those who know me, it is no surprise, I love the Commander EDH format. It is a lot of fun. I have a play group that I play with several times throughout the week, and I have several different Commander decks in person, online, and lists I put together on an app, etc. I'm all for Commander. And I have a unique list today that I know a lot of people probably never thought of, and that is Wurm Tribal. And now, some people might think off the rip, we're going with the mono green Grothama, but we're not actually taking that approach. We have a partner commander, and we're going to break that down today. Okay, so this deck's going to be all colors except for blue. It's a partner commander, like I said. First up, we got Bruce Taro, Boris Herder. Legendary creature, human ally, 2 red-white. When Bruce Taro enters the battlefield or attacks, target creature you control gains double strike and lifelink until end of turn. 3/3 with partner. Next up, we have Ikra Shadiki, the Usurper. Legendary Naga Wizard for 3 black and a green, Menace 3/7. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. So if you notice, we're going with like a sub-life game theme, aside the Wurm Tribal as well. So the reasons we went with Bruce and Ikra here is, one, first of all, we need those colors. Those colors are really helpful, whereas like something like Grothama would be a mono green and really limiting. So the partner works really well here, and both of them do a great job at gaining us a good amount of life. We're going to be off to a slow start sometimes unless we get the perfect ramp package, which is just not always the case, unfortunately. So we'll have a little bit of a slower start, and this helps us stabilize. We can get some of that life back later on in the game, or we can even throw it out early enough if we need to. Bruce is fantastic, giving everything double strike and lifelink. Imagine these 7/7 plus worms attacking for double strike and lifelink. That is so much life you'll gain. I've actually even gotten over 100 life before with like no combos or anything, but like it's really good at what it does. And Ikra is really helpful as well, making it so when our worms connect, we also gain life equal to their toughness. A lot of these worms got big butts, man, and that's a lot of life you gain right back. Okay, with the commanders out of the way, now we're going to jump into some of our ramp. So of course we got some of the classic stuff. We got our Soul Ring, which is going to help us produce a lot of mana early on, hopefully. Then we got an Arcane Signet to help color fixing, as well as Chromatic Lantern, which is a fantastic way to make sure we get all the colors we need whenever we need them, as well as producing additional mana itself. We also have some later mana rocks. One we have is Gilded Lotus for 5 mana, which will allow us to produce 3. And for 7 mana, we have Chromatic Orrery, which is a legendary artifact which will allow us to spend mana as though it were any color, which is the perfect mana fixer. It also taps for 5 colors, or you could pay 5 and tap this to draw a card for each color among permanents you control, which in best case scenario will draw us about 4 cards because of the fact that we have 4 colors, of course. But that's not bad. 5 mana, tap it, draw 4, and you can do this repeatedly. That's really nice. Alright, the next part of the ramp package we won't spend too much time on, but we're running stuff like Nature's Lore, 3 Visits, which are both going to let us search for any forest card, put it onto the battlefield. We also got Farseek for 2 mana as well, which allows us to look for any Plains, Island, Swamp, or Mountain card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. And then shortly after, we got Cultivate and Kodama's Reach, which are both going to do the same thing for 3 mana. We're going to search for 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped. And then we'll shuffle. And lastly, is for the ramp package, we have Sky Shroud Claim. It's going to let us search for 2 forest cards, put them both onto the battlefield, and then shuffle our library. So some good ramp package. It's going to help us get the colors that we need for the situations we're in. Next up, we're going to move into some of our enchantments. The first enchantment I'm going to start with will be Mirari's Wake, since we're on the theme of ramp anyways. This card is going to be 3 green and a white. Creatures you control get +1/+1, so it'll give an anthem. And whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produced. So yeah, it's really good ramp. If you can ramp into this relatively early, it's going to double all your mana produced from your lands. And nice little anthem from the worms as well. They're big already, but now they're even bigger. Next up, we'll go with some of our card draw. Since we'll be gaining a lot of life, we decided to put in Dawn of Hope. Whenever you gain life, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. You can also pay 4 mana, 3 and a white, to create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. So yeah, every time we gain life off of our commander's abilities, and like that will trigger for each time too. If we have Equal out, every time one of our worms connects, we get to pay 2 and draw a card if we really need that card draw. Alright, on the theme of card draw, we also have Garruk's Uprising. It's a 3 mana enchantment, a green and 2 colorless. When Garruk's Uprising enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Creatures you control have Trample, which is going to be fantastic. These big worms beaten down with Trample is going to be really hard to deal with. But also, the last part of this enchantment is, whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. So this is going to be a really good source of card draw since we're playing worms, so majority of them are going to be meeting that requirement relatively easily. Alright, next up we have Rhythm of the Wild, which is 1 red, green, and 1 colorless. Creature spells you control can't be countered. It's going to be really fantastic against those blue players that are trying to hold up their mana all the time. This will make it so we can safely resolve our worms. Non-token creatures you control also have Riot. So whenever one of our creatures enter the battlefield, we have the choice of giving it haste so it can attack that turn, or we can give it a +1/+1 counter and just save up for a little bit later. Alright, next up we have Descendants Path. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card that shares a creature type with a creature you control, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Otherwise, put that card on the bottom of your library. Now, this enchantment will be phenomenal since we're doing a tribal deck. It's only 2 and 1 green, so you can get this thing out relatively early. Now, there's a card I was going to talk about a little bit later, but I kind of want to mention it now. It's Mutavault. It's a land that taps for 1 colorless, or you could pay 1 and make it become a 2/2 creature with all creature types until end of turn. It's still a land. Now, if I mentioned this land later and no one would have like any idea why we put it in, the reason here is because of Descendants Path. Let's say we maybe got board wiped after having this, or someone targeted removal our worm. Our upkeep, we go to our upkeep. This Descendants Path enchantment will trigger to check if we have a worm after we reveal the top card of our library. In response to the trigger before we reveal the top card of our library, you could pay 1 and make Mutavault a worm, a creature, because it's all creature types. So it'll be a worm, it'll meet that little clause, and then Descendants Path will resolve, and if we hit a worm off the top, well, there you go. We had no worms, and now we have some crazy worms. And a lot of the worms are big, so that could be a really big play. That's the main reason to have Mutavault in here, is just for cheeky stuff like that. Alright, next up on enchantments, we have Molten Echoes. When this enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. Whenever a non-token creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Token gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. So man, this is a nice way to double up on our guys. Surely the one that enters that's the real copy will not have haste, but it's not necessary. We get the copy that's going to have haste, and if it has any enter the battlefield effects, those trigger as well. If it has any death effects, those trigger as well, and we have a little bit of both of those in the deck. It gets any attack triggers if there are any. It's really nice. Imagine this is off of it entering the battlefield, not off of it cast. And the reason that matters is if we cheat a worm out with like Descendants Path, for example, we don't have to worry about not getting the token because we didn't cast a spell, or we didn't pay any mana to cast it or anything like that. No, the token's gonna gain haste, it's gonna enter, it will die, but it's gonna do the job. It's gonna swing, maybe kill some things if someone blocks it. If no one has a blocker for it, well, they're just in trouble because these worms are coming in and they're hasty. Okay, our next enchantment coming up is Dead Bridge Chant. It's 4 black and a green. When it enters the battlefield, put the top 10 cards of your library into your graveyard. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you'll choose a card at random in your graveyard. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield, otherwise put it in your hand. So this thing will be a lot of value if it can stay on the table long enough. So yeah, you mill yourself a good amount, but there's actually a worm, a small worm, who gets buffed by creatures in your yard. So if you hit some and this gets removed, it's not 100% terrible. Also, we have a little bit of graveyard recursion with this itself, or some other cards we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, this is really nice if we can get at least even just one turn cycle. We'll mill 10 cards, and then that's just going to fuel our graveyard, and then we can start getting things back. Of course, it's a little bit of chance. We need to get lucky, and hopefully we hit the creature. If all we have is creatures, then we're just going to go to town. And at least if you don't hit it, you still get to put the card into your hand, so it's pretty nice. It's like one of those like troublesome things if it's left alone for too long, but also people play like Ristic Studies and Smothering Ties and all this like other crazy nonsense that like you might be able to sneak under the radar with this thing, especially if you can ramp into it relatively early and get it out pretty fast. Then it's like pretty nice. Of course, you don't want to just, well, the thing that's nice about this is like if it only recurred stuff from the yard, you probably wouldn't want to play it really fast and early, but this will fuel your yard. You're going to put 10 cards into the graveyard. So it's fine if you get this out really early and have nothing in your graveyard, because you're going to put stuff in there and you're going to be able to start getting stuff back. So a nice little enchantment. Okay, next enchantment coming up, we got Sandworm Convergence. This is our biggest one and our last one. It's an 8-drop for 6 and 2 green. Creatures with flying can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. Right off the rip, that's fantastic. Yes, we do have big beat-em-up worms. They're huge, they're swinging. But the problem is they can't really do too much about flyers. Majority of them, if any, there's none in here that have reach. I don't know if there exists some little random ones with it, but they do not have reach, and none of them have flying. They're worms. They're ground boys. But this will prevent you from getting attacked by creatures with flying. But that's not all. That's not where it stops. At the beginning of your end step. So that is really nice, because this is going to immediately proc off the very first turn you play it if it doesn't get removed immediately. If this thing resolves and sticks around, you're getting the value immediately. At the beginning of your end step, you're going to make a 5/5 green worm creature token. Now that's really nice for stuff like Descendants Path as well. We got a little token here, but that token counts as a worm, and it'll help with anything that requires us to have certain creature types in play. But yeah, so we'll create 5/5 worms at the end of our turn every single time. So it's a really nice card, man. It's going to generate some value if it gets left alone for too long. Alright, so we're done with the enchantments here. I'm going to move on to our artifacts. We got some nice ones here. So starting it off, I'll start with some simple stuff. We got Lightning Greaves. This is like a commander staple. Majority of decks, if you're in any creature meta at all, you definitely want Lightning Greaves and maybe even Swiftfoot Boots. But we just went with Lightning Greaves. This is going to give equipped creature Haste and Shroud for 2 mana, and the equip cost is just straight up 0. So you can just move this thing around once you get it on the battlefield. Alright, next up we got Urza's Incubator. It's a 3-drop. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. Creature spells of the chosen type are reduced by 2. Costs 2 less to cast. So yeah, it's just a really good, just another good, it's essentially a ramp spell in a sense. It doesn't necessarily give you 2 more mana, but it reduces your worms by 2 more mana. So we can start getting those 7 drops out relatively early after playing this. Alright, next up, we got Door of Destinies. When this thing enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type again. When you cast a spell of the chosen type, put a charge counter on it. Creatures you control get +1/+1 for each charge counter on Door of Destinies. Now, this is really good. Arguably, it's not necessary, but we are playing a tribal deck, and I think it'd be a nice way to buff some of the worms, considering that some of the early game worms aren't going to be relatively large. Yeah, that's going to be our late game stuff, but this can just add some extra damage, honestly. Push through for a little bit more damage. We're playing a bunch of worms. It is cast, however, and we do cheat some in. So I was considering something like Coat of Arms instead of Door of Destinies. That might be a potential upgrade if anyone is following this list and is thinking of building it themselves. I would consider Coat of Arms. Probably a little bit more pricey than Door of Destinies, but it would work out really well, and there's not a lot of people playing worms, probably aside from yourself, so Coat of Arms would be a really good choice. Okay, and next artifact we got is a 2-drop. It's Pyre of Heroes. You pay 2, tap it, sacrifice a creature, search your library for a creature card that shares a creature type with the sacrificed creature and has converted mana cost equal to 1 plus that creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield and then shuffle. But you can only activate this at sorcery speed. So it's pretty much a birthing pod effect, but just for like creature, like tribal, a tribal one. But it also can only be done at sorcery speed. But it's pretty nice. If we get some really early like worms, such as like the 2 or 3 drop ones, there's a few shapeshifter boys in here. You can let them serve their purpose, and then you can sacrifice them to this to start snowballing into the big guys. And then this thing can get pretty crazy. It's a pretty nice card. I actually just added it recently, and I think it works pretty well. Okay, next enchantment, we got Icon of Ancestry. When it enters the battlefield, you'll choose a creature type. Creatures of chosen type get +1/+1, so we got an Anthem for him. And you can pay 3, tap Icon of Ancestry to look at the top 3 cards of your library. You can reveal a creature card of the chosen type from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in your library ready in a random order. So yeah, it's helpful when you need to dig a little deeper into the deck and try to find some worms if you don't have enough, or maybe the ones you have are a little too pricey mana-wise. It's just really good card selection. Okay, lastly for our artifacts here, we got Belbs or Belby's Portal. I'm unsure on how to say that, to be honest. But it's a 5-drop artifact. When it comes into play, you name a creature type, and then you can pay 3, tap it, put a creature card of the chosen type from your hand into play. So it's essentially Quicksilver Amulet, just for a little bit cheaper for the activation. But yeah, and it's strictly for creature types. So yeah, this is a beautiful way to just tap 3 mana and throw down some of your big boys. Impervious Great Wurm, Pelakka Wurm, whatever you want. You can just start slamming worms like crazy. So this is one of those needs to be removed cards. If your players allow you to keep this for too long, you're just gonna like steamroll them, most likely. But the other thing to consider is like for stuff like Door of Destinies, you're not gonna get those cast triggers. But Molten Echoes and Descendants Path don't necessarily care about that. So majority of the stuff, it'll be fine. So yeah. It's really nice. The only thing is it's strictly the creatures of the chosen type. So if you could like ramp really fast early on, you can get this thing out on like turn 3 and just start going to town. Okay, so tackling the instants and sorceries, we first got some targeted removal with Beast Within and Generous Gift, which are both going to do the same thing: destroy a target permanent and give the controller 3/3 Beast or Elephant. Then we got some board wipes like Austere Command, Cleansing Nova to get rid of creatures. These also give us the ability to destroy artifacts and enchantments. Then we also got Settle the Wreckage if we're in a pinch and need to exile some creatures that are attacking us. It's a perfect way to. Alright, and we also got Naya Charm, which is going to either let us get stuff back from the yard, tap down some creatures for like a lethal attack, or bolt something that we need to get rid of. We have Ink Shield, which is going to do a similar effect to Settle the Wreckage, but instead it's going to give us a bunch of creatures based off of all the damage we prevent. We also got Patriarch's Bidding, which is a 5-drop, and it's going to let us choose a creature type and return all creature cards of the chosen type from the graveyard to the battlefield. This also is for every player. Now, as long as we're not playing against any other tribal decks, we shouldn't have a problem with that. But if so, then you just got to pick your moments wisely. And lastly, we have Genesis Wave. We have some ways to get big amounts of mana. This is going to let us just reveal everything off the top and put a bunch of permanents into play. It could be a win con in some scenarios, depending on what we have on board. Alright, and lastly, we're going to be talking about the creatures we're running, the worms themselves. So we'll start off with the 2 and 3 drops. 2-drop, we got a Boneyard Wurm. His power and toughness is equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So he could be a 0/0 if you play him without having anything in your yard. So you gotta be careful there. We also have Voracious Wurm. Enters the battlefield with X1/1 counters on it, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. Do not slam this guy down early unless you're trying to do Pyre of Heroes shenanigans. I've gotten this guy out after gaining 20 life because, like I said, the deck can gain life nicely. And I got him with 20 counters, and he was a 20-22 or a 22-22 beater on a 2-drop. It's ridiculous. You don't always have to go for that high of life, but definitely want to gain a decent amount of life before playing him. For 3 drops, we got Realm Walker. It's a changeling. He's gonna let us look at the top card of our library and cast spells off the top. And we also got Mirror Entity, which is another changeling, which can buff our guys by however much mana we put into them. Okay, moving on to the 4-drops. We got Soul Swallower and Trench Wurm. Soul Swallower is gonna give himself 3+1/+1 counters on each of our upkeeps if there's at least 4 or more types among cards in our graveyard. He also has Trample and is a 3/3. And Trench Wurm is gonna let us for 3 mana tap him and 3 mana tap him, destroy a non-basic land. So if we ever have some troublesome lands, we can get rid of them with him. Okay, now we're going to tackle some of the bigger ones. We're going on to the 5-drops. And I'm going in order here just to show that indeed Pyre of Heroes has some work that can be done. So like we definitely have the 2, 3s, 4s, 5, 6. After 7 is when you probably don't want to use Pyre of Heroes if you're running that. Anyways, first guy on the 5-drops, we got Bellowing Tangleworm. It's got Intimidate, and other green creatures will have Intimidate, which is the majority of our worms. And that means they can't be blocked except by black or artifact creatures or creatures that share a type with it. Almost got mixed up with Fear. We got Grothama, which is the typical worm commander. Then we have Shivan Wurm, which will bounce a red or green creature to its owner's hand. And we have Conifer Wurm. He cares about snow permanents, and you can buff him by XX, where X is the number of snow permanents, for 4 mana. So we run a bunch of snow basics. Those are the only ones that we have in the deck. It's about like 7 basic lands or whatever. But yeah. Alright, moving on to the 6-drops. We have Pathbreaker Wurm. It's got Soul Bond as long as it's paired with another creature. Both creatures have Trample. We have Ravager Wurm. It has Riot. Also, when it enters the battlefield, it may fight a creature I don't control, or it may destroy a land with an activated ability that isn't a mana ability. We got Armada Wurm, 5/5 with Trample. When it enters the battlefield, creates a 5/5 with Trample. Massacre Wurm, everyone's favorite. Enters the battlefield, it's going to reduce. It's going to give all creatures your opponent's control -2/-2, and whenever a creature an opponent control dies, they lose 2 life. And we have Wurmcoil Engine. Oh, I love this card. Death Touch Lifelink 6/6. When it dies, it creates a 3/3 with Death Touch and a 3/3 with Lifelink. And it's just insane to get that kind of value when it dies. And we have ways to get it back too. Alright, now we're moving on to the meat of the deck. We got the 7-drops. First off, we got Elder Scale Wurm. Trample 7/7. When it enters the battlefield, if your life total is less than 7, it becomes 7. And as long as you have 7 or more life, damage that will reduce you to less than 7 reduces it to 7. So it can stop you from pretty much dying. We have Panglacial Wurm, a fun little 9/5 with Trample. While you're searching your library, you may cast him, or you may play him from your library. So it's like a really cheeky thing. You just go and crack a fetch land real quick. Oh, I'm also going to play this guy from my library. It's like the only card that really does this. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's like the only card that can interrupt a spell's resolve. So like before a Kodama's Reach, for example, would completely resolve, you can cast a Panglacial Wurm. It's really weird. It's a weird one. It's like the only card like that. It's super sick. Engulfing Slagworm, when it becomes blocked or blocks a creature, destroy that creature, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. It's also a 7/7 beater. We have Sifter Wurm. When enters the battlefield, scry 3, then reveal the top card of your library. You may gain life equal to that card's converted mana cost. Penumbra Wurm, Trample 6/6. When it dies, create a 6/6 with Trample. Channel Horde Wurm is a really good one. 6/6 Trample. When it deals combat damage to a player, you can return a card from your graveyard to your hand. Just a lot of good things you could do there. We have Plaka Wurm, which is, he had to be in here, right? 7/7 Trample, enters the battlefield, you gain 7 life, and when it dies, draw a card. Also, here's the honorary worm of the deck, Nyxbloom Ancient. Not quite a worm, but worms cost a lot of mana, and Nyxbloom will help. 5/5 enchantment creature, with Trample. If you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times that much mana instead. Which means, yes, Chromatic Orrery will tap for 15. And our lands will tap for 3, unless there's any other shenanigans, anything altering it, of course. But yeah, so Nyxbloom Ancient is a fantastic card, honestly. If you need to find ways to generate mana, if you can get this guy to stick around long enough, he will become a problem, and you will easily just take over a game. Okay, now moving into the very last few cards. We're not going to be talking about lands here, but I'm going to post a link to the entire deck list, and people can, you can feel free to take a look and make any changes if you'd like to, or run with the deck list as it is. It's a really fun deck. It's definitely not competitive by any means, but it's pretty solid, holds up pretty well, and it's a lot of fun to play. So here comes the last few guys. We got Untitled Wurm. I might be pronouncing that wrong. This guy cost 15 mana, 9/14 with trample, but he has Convoke, so you could tap creatures while going to cast a spell to reduce the mana cost by either that color or one of the colorless. We also got Wurm, which is an 8-drop, 7/7 with trample. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life and draw a card. You can pay 3 mana, put them from your graveyard into the library, third from the top. We have Impervious Great Wurm, which is a 10-drop, 16/16 with Convoke. So similar to Autochthon, you can tap creatures to reduce its mana cost, and this is a 16/16 with Indestructible. And last but not least, we had to have Worldspine Wurm. This is an 11 mana, 15/15 with Trample. When he dies, put 3 5/5 green worm creature tokens with Trample onto the battlefield, and when it's put into the graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into its owner's library. So short of any stifle effects, this guy is always going to like stick around unless he gets exiled after hitting the battlefield. He'll always come right back. But yeah, this is pretty much my Wurm Tribal list. There's some lands and stuff too. I run good amount of fetches, shocks, and stuff. But like I said, the deck list will be in the description below. You can feel free to give it a look. If anyone's aware of Untap or any other source like that where you can play Commander online, I would definitely recommend giving it a go and checking out if you like it or not. But yeah, there it is. That's my take on Wurm Tribal. I don't think Grothama's a good fit in the deck, but I don't think you'd make a great Wurm Tribal commander, aside from the fact that it is a worm. But not a bad card in the deck either. But I think Bruce and Ikra is a good commander set for this deck list. You could swap out with Saskia, but I like what Bruce and Ikra do in terms of gaining life with the worms, and it helps you become a harder threat to deal with. But yeah, if you guys are into this type of thing, I'm down to do this like every Monday. Maybe not just a deck tech, but my thoughts on upcoming cards coming out, or just like personal like collection or anything Magic related on Mondays. That's what I'm thinking of doing. But anyways, I think my buddy Mario's calling me up. Got some Mario things planned. Stick around for that. Alright, peace out everybody.